Well, good morning. I'm honored to be here. Actually, Joel caught me in the lobby on the way in and said, you know, this is, we try to have a diverse array of speakers every year at the Cyber Summit, and we decided to lower the standards this year and have a member of Congress present. Thank you, Joel, for that warm welcome. I appreciate that. Just kidding. Thanks for the opportunity to be here on what I think is probably one of the most serious problems from a national security perspective facing the United States that we know about and are not prepared to handle in this country today. You know, it's an interesting thing, if you look back just a few short years ago when the Russians decided to move tanks and soldiers into Georgia over the dispute of Ossetia, something pretty interesting happened. In the old days, there was something called prepping the battlefield. And in prepping the battlefield, normally meant barrages of airstrikes, artillery fire, before you moved your troops and your tanks forward to seize your objective. It was a time-honored military-style planning that has happened literally for generations. But something different happened in the prepping of the battlefield in that particular conflict. People went to the gas station and the gas pumps stopped working. They went to their financial institutions, which could not function and could not tell them how much money they had in the bank or allow them to take money out. They had the distribution of natural gas was shut down. Basically, it seized that area economically and just shut everything off. It was the first known prepping the battlefield with a cyber attack. So think about where we are today. It has really changed. So you have standard thieves who are trying to steal your identity and maybe try to get into your bank account or try to commit some scam using cyber crime to perpetrate that. You have hacktivists who are trying to get into networks and cause disruptions or denials based on their political or philosophical beliefs. You have what is now a nation-state adopted military planning for cyber attacks, denial of service in a broad way, in prepping the battlefield. That is now by all major nation states with militaries, part of their military planning. You have the thought that you have organized crime, some assisted by nation states, some not, who are aggressively pursuing large-scale pieces of information for which to return and sell in the black market in the cyber world. And lastly, if that wasn't enough, and I figure if I'm the chairman of the Intelligence Committee and can't sleep at night, neither should any of you. You have nation states who have invested in their military and intelligence capabilities when it comes to cyber in a way that is unprecedented in history, to go into private sector networks, steal intellectual property, take it back, repurpose it, and commercialize it to compete against American companies, European companies, and Asian companies. And the sad part about this is it happens to the tune, some estimates are, of $1 trillion in lost intellectual property. $1 trillion. There is one major manufacturer in this country that has said due to Chinese theft of their intellectual property, it has cost them 20,000 U.S. manufacturing jobs. One company. There was a company recently that was reported to our committee that spent 10 years, $1 billion in research and development to try to do the next generation. It was materials research that they had developed and strength of materials, pretty valuable stuff in a changing economy. You get a knock on your door on a Monday morning and said by the FBI, got bad news for you. Over the weekend, we have determined that the Chinese government has gotten into your system and stolen every bit of your $1 billion research and development over the last 3 days that you took 10 years to develop. That is a staggering and disturbing trend. You know, one way we beat the Soviet Union, if you will, and caused the collapse of their empire was not by firing a shot, but it was by competing with them economically. And Gorbachev said at the end of that they just couldn't keep up with the economic advances and technology that caused them to collapse. They couldn't keep spending that money on those developments. And it set millions and millions of people free across the Eastern Bloc. Think about this in this generation, with the possibility to steal what has been the United States' one advantage in the world economy, our innovation. We have always stayed a little bit ahead of our competition around the world by being a little bit more innovative, a little faster, a little bit quicker to commercialize our research and development into products and services that Americans in the world crave, demand, and need. But what if a nation state like China has dedicated itself to steal that advantage? They don't have to wait 10 years and $1 billion for the next generations of materials strength research. They stole it. They just leaped ahead by 10 years on that particular, this one small company, by the way. And we see interesting trends. So as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, my job is to oversee the 16 intelligence agencies, both civilian and military, do all their budgets, do all their oversight, do some policy checkoffs, be that third-party validator, if you will, on some of the most sensitive things that our federal government engages in, covert actions and things that you can imagine, very compartmentalized, highly sensitive, and very classified. So what we saw earlier in a trend was that the Chinese were sending human spies to the United States, and you've seen some interesting public cases, Motorola, Cisco, others, pharmaceuticals. There's even a case where they sent someone to steal pesticide formulas in Indianapolis, Indiana. You know, I'm sure you've seen Indianapolis, Indiana in the Bourne movies, right? Hotbed of espionage. And what they would do is slowly and surely try to steal information from those companies, intellectual property, and repurpose it back in China. And then what we saw about 5 to 6 years ago was this serious investment in cyber capability by the Chinese government, both their military and civilian intelligence services, and exponentially grow their capability and their activity and their malicious behavior in US networks and European networks and Asian networks. It is breathtaking what they are trying to accomplish, and unfortunately, what they are successful in stealing when it comes to intellectual property. Breathtaking. So now you have to step back, if you're the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and say, how do we at least give our private sector networks the opportunity to defend themselves? And I don't care how good your IT shop is. I don't care how good your CIO is. I always tell the business community when I talk to them, if your CIO comes in the morning and says, don't worry about it, got it handled, we'll have no problem here. It's time for a new CIO. It is nearly impossible for any size company out there on their own to defend against what is a nation state trying to get into your network. Thousands and thousands of people who have the sole responsibility of getting up every morning and stealing what you got. That's a pretty tough hurdle to get over. And the sophistication of the malware, of the long persistent threat source code is staggering. And it is exponentially getting more complicated and more difficult to catch, more difficult to find. And as we get more integrated in the internet, I mean, now you can use your iPhone as your credit card. You can imagine that if you get that good and you are that sophisticated, what information you can lay your hands on. Pretty staggering. So again, as the chairman, my job is to make sure that our government networks are protected and our national security interests are met. Well, when I look at all the threats that we've talked about, I mean, we've got some serious things to worry about in the world. You have the North Koreans facing just about starvation, with over half their population continues to build and invest in the capability to deliver a nuclear weapon on a missile. So we're concerned about those issues and rattle their saber and move their troops up to the DMZ and then back off the DMZ and have, excuse me, other conflicts where they're a little more aggressive than they should be. We worry about Iran's pursuit and dash for a nuclear weapon that would be destabilizing to the Middle East and cause a nuclear weapons arms race in the Middle East. We have al-Qaeda cells now developing in Tunisia and Libya and Mali and across northern Africa and joining with the al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. We see our activities in Yemen where al-Qaeda decided they were going to actually physically hold ground, which was one of the key elements of their pursuit for a caliphate. We see that instability with China and Japan over the islands in the South China Sea that may lead to some very aggressive behavior, including conflict. And certainly the Japanese are concerned about it. The Chinese have been certainly very vocal about their interests in those islands and telling countries like the United States, butt out, this is our problem, despite the fact we have a defense treaty with the nation of Japan. So all of those things are happening all at the same time, except for one thing. We know today that we are literally in a cyber war in the United States. It happens every single day. From a criminal perspective, that credit card that's in your wallet will get hit 300,000 times just today, trying to get in, get your information, steal some money, and leave. That pales in comparison to the sheer number of attacks and cyber espionage theft that happens every single day. So our government networks get hit every single day, hundreds of thousands of times a day. They're trying to get in and steal information. And you know what? Nation states have been spying on each other since we've been a nation. Remember Nathan Hale, who was sent in by George Washington in New York during the Revolutionary War to get information on the British, which we believe may have been the first act of espionage on behalf of the Continental Army. And it's been happening for generations. Figuring out what your adversaries are doing is always healthy for your national security and makes things a little more predictive. But we're seeing something completely different. If you look at the Russians, they are fairly rational actors. So yes, they're continuing to try to steal military secrets. We see them engaged in large-scale organized crime efforts across the Eastern Bloc, as I said, to steal your credit card information. They're very good, probably the most sophisticated cyber actors in the world, followed by China, who is growing its capabilities exponentially year over end, and then makes up for what they're almost close to the Russians in just sheer volume of attacks and what they're looking for. Again, the Russians haven't been keen on stealing private sector information. The Chinese clearly have. And then you now open up a whole new world. And Secretary Panetta brought this to an open forum recently. You have the Iranian government, who is growing its cyber capability, who has already engaged in cyber attacks of denial of service in our financial services network in the United States, as so reported publicly. So they attacked a company called Aramco to try to get in, not only steal things, but break things. And for those of you who are the technical gurus here, I don't have to go in a long explanation about how you can now physically break the operating system of a computer that would allow you not to understand what data was either stolen or manipulated, and it would take you a very long time to try to reconstruct it. Pretty dangerous stuff when you think about how connected we are to the internet. So now you have a non-rational actor, Iran, who believes it's in their best interest to try to have wholesale, large disruption of activity and or manipulation of data in our financial services network. Think of it. Here they are again, those darn internet. Happens to me a lot. I actually announced the investigation of Huawei and ZTE, two telecommunications companies. My phone didn't work for about 2 months after that. It's crazy. This is serious business. And it's serious business because today, these companies are really on their own in these networks. They've got great IT people. They have great cybersecurity analysts. They spend a lot of money trying to get this piece right. but it is impossible for these companies all on their own to worry about a Chinese attack or a Russian intrusion. Oh, and by the way, a country that is not going to make a rational decision about the economic cost of trying to shut down our financial services networks in the United States. You know, it was publicly reported about a year ago, and it didn't get a lot of attention, that there was a long persistent threat in one of our stock exchanges. It very successfully, it was absolutely dangerous, malicious software that was laying in wait for the right opportunity. And the scary thing about that is that all they had to do was turn it on to cause mass financial chaos in the marketplace. Think about how dangerous that is. You don't have to blow up a building to have mass chaos in New York City. You just cause horrible disruption and chaos and misunderstanding and manipulation of data in the markets. Think of what that does. It causes mass chaos, not only here, but around the world. Very dangerous stuff. So now you have Iran, who has very aggressively, and has now been publicly reported, very aggressively pursued an effort against our financial networks, and the sophistication of what they've done to a company like Aramco overseas is devastating and serious and concerning. So how do we fix it? At the end of the day, what do we do now? Well, here's something interesting. So in the course of these 16 agencies, you can imagine the CIA, the National Security Agency, the FBI, NGA, all of the other alphabet soups that are out there trying to collect information and put us in a position to protect the United States of America. And I will tell you, our government networks are pretty secure, probably the most secure in the world. Now, not perfect. We still get penetrations. They still get in. It causes us some problems. But why does that happen? Well, we use our intelligence services the way we're supposed to go overseas and find out what our adversaries are up to. What are they doing that could cause a harm or a threat to the United States of America? And so our NSA, who is pretty darn good at this, can come back and say, we think that there is some really awful source code, some malicious source code that's coming this way. We're going to apply it to our government networks to make sure that when it hits, it has no effect. And once you learn the signatures, we're pretty good at this, to find it. So you look around, the private sector network doesn't have that kind of protection. And here's the oddest thing of all. It's against the law for us to share malicious source code if we've collected in a classified and sensitive manner with anyone in the private sector that could use it to protect their own network. I used to be an FBI agent. I worked organized crime and public corruption in Chicago. Didn't get it all. So you have, somebody comes in to me as a source and says, you know what, there's going to be a home invasion on LaSalle Street tomorrow at 2 o'clock. They're coming with ski masks, coming with guns, they're going to hit the safe that's in the basement, and they don't care if anybody gets hurt. I was obligated under the law to do something about that, rightly so. You call the homeowner, you call the local police. We might go and have a little present waiting for them when they arrived. To try to protect that family, those people, their valuables. What is the difference if the government comes into possession some horrible, aggressive, malicious source code that we know will either steal information or provide a denial of service on a private sector network that could cause huge harm? What is the difference? Why shouldn't we be obligated to help that particular company by providing in some way that protects the classified nature of the way we've obtained the information to, in fact, protect their own networks? I think it makes all the sense in the world. So what we did in a bipartisan way, I worked very closely with my Democrat counterpart, a guy named Dutch Ruppersberger from Maryland, who is the senior ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee with me, to sit down and say, let's put a bill together where we can get the high-tech community of Palo Alto and the financial community and others from New York City on the same bill, where both groups can come to agreement that this would be the right direction, the right way to protect our networks. And again, we're under siege. So we interviewed hundreds of companies, privacy groups, government agencies, and came up with a whopping 13-page bill for the solution. Matter of fact, we were so worried that people wouldn't take it serious at 13 pages, we thought of adding an amendment of 400 pages of just pablum. Thankfully, we didn't do that. And here's what this bill does. It says, in a classified way, the government can share information, malicious source code, with the private sector so that they can apply it to their networks and protect their networks. So the government isn't protecting your network, the government isn't monitoring your network, the government is just sharing malicious source code so that we can provide that as a filter. And think about it, McAfee and Norton and others do this hundreds of millions of times a second already. They're already filtering your system, trying to figure out, keep the bad stuff off. But they don't get it all. And it's really difficult for them to get the very sophisticated, sometimes millions of lines of code. If those of you who looked at Stuxnet, you saw how serious and complicated that code, that malicious source code was. And it was literally hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Pretty difficult to catch, unless you know what you're looking for. So it made entirely good sense to us. So we had a bipartisan bill passed out of my committee without one no vote. We got a bipartisan vote in the House. The bill now resides in the Senate. We applied some of the privacy groups' concerns to try to make sure that this bill would protect privacy, protect civil liberties, and still allow a forum for exchange of malicious source code information. And so here's what the other equation of that is. The government doesn't have everything. It doesn't get it all right. And so what we thought is, gosh, if Norton or McAfee or your provider, Verizon or AT&T, comes across some code coming across their networks that we haven't seen before, shouldn't they share it back with us so that we can go out and try to find the perpetrator of that and prepare those networks again for what might be coming next? Made sense to me. Happens every day in America, and every criminal investigation across this country. Somebody shows up and says, you know what, there is going to be that home invasion on LaSalle Street in Chicago tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You might want to do something about it. That's really what this bill does. It's very, very simple. So by the time it was done with amendments, it was up to about 26 pages. Most of that was trying to accommodate privacy concerns to make sure and certain that the only thing that was happening here is the exchange of malicious source code. If we don't do something, we are going to have a major catastrophe from a cyber attack here in the United States. Again, other countries have learned for a very little bit of money, you can continue to invest in your cyber capability, Iran comes to mind, that could cause huge problems for the most integrated society on the face of the earth, which is the United States of America. And we have a lot of folks who would still like to cause us some trouble, unfortunately. And we better do something. So there was two approaches, one in the Senate and one in the House. Ours was a very simple cybersecurity sharing arrangement to see how it works. It was based on something called the DIB project, the Defense Industrial Base. So because these defense companies already had a relationship in a classified manner with the government, Department of Defense, they could do some sharing of information. So it took a little bit. There was about 17 companies in it to try to work out the kinks in the beginnings, which has been a helpful tool for us to try to figure out how we would do this on a big scale. And it was hugely helpful, not necessarily even to the companies who were there, who understood that they were under siege every single day. Obviously, they had defense information that lots of people wanted to get their hands on. But it was their supply chain. And their biggest weakness in this whole event wasn't necessarily the main companies, it was their supply chain. So some of these small companies had just virtually no protection on their nets, on their networks, excuse me. And so it really provided huge service. So we based that and we said, can we scale it up to a national level, provide this information, and allow the private sector networks to protect themselves? And the overwhelming conclusion is absolutely this can happen, and it should happen. So if you see the rise and increase of at least reporting of these activities, you can see how important this is. The Japanese just came out and announced that they had their missile systems, radar systems, have been penetrated. They did not acknowledge who they thought that might be, but you can imagine, given the state of affairs between China and Japan, you might have a wild guess who may have been interested in their Aegis radar defense systems and all of their defense and missile capabilities when it comes to surface-to-surface missiles on the water. Pretty serious stuff. And what they found is they weren't nearly prepared to defend themselves. If you see what has happened with Bank of America, with this just in the last 2 weeks, and PNC and Wells Fargo, and the serious level of effort that was put in to try to get into those networks, and just how darn close it came to something perilous. If you look at the escalation of even the credit card companies, who, as they said, just a year ago was less than 300,000 and now is a little over 300,000 times every day, and they're just working pretty darn hard to make sure that nobody's successful. This is an epidemic problem. So it not only has military consequences, it has economic consequences. And I argue we can't wait much longer. The debate can't go on forever. I thought we had a good and thorough debate in the House of Representatives and passed a bipartisan bill. We're waiting for some action in the Senate. Their approach is different. They want to do a mandated set of standards for your networks. And I just disagree with that approach. I understand what they're trying to do. Their argument is that companies won't do this on their own if the federal government doesn't tell them to do it. And here's my concern about that. It means that the government will have to go through and create the rules and regulations and the standards of how to protect private sector networks. That seems a little close to getting in your business to me. And I don't think we have to do that. I think that it will take at least 18 months to promulgate the rules to go through that. And I'm telling you, I'm not sure we have 18 months before we have a catastrophic attack in the United States from a cyber perspective. All of this is pretty serious business. Hopefully we can work this out. I've been meeting with my counterpart, Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. We have an exceptionally good working relationship. We're making progress on the notion of a cyber sharing bill so that we can allow the private sector to protect their networks. And hopefully, soon, we'll get some agreement, and maybe in what's called lame duck here in the last little bit of the year, we can finally get something done that at least puts us on the path, and it won't be all the solution, but at least puts us on the path to have a very robust cyber sharing regime so that we can protect, the government can help protect private sector networks, not by physically, but just by sharing information, and vice versa. That the government can get better and find perpetrators of what has been hitting, unfortunately, successfully, these companies. And just the last step here, and I want to leave some time for questions, but this is important. We just concluded, after a little over a year's investigation, bipartisan investigation, my ranking member and I, we're getting information that was so concerning about efforts to control the infrastructure of the United States when it came to telecommunications, and all of the data that flows through it. So imagine every little bit of data. It could be your personal finances, your medical records, it could be everything that you want to keep private flows over these networks. And so these two large companies have decided that they want to increase their position in the United States of America. And the Australians, a little over a year ago, said that they were so concerned that they wouldn't even allow them to be a part of their build-out of broadband in Australia. They banned them. So we said we better take a look at this and see if we can make some determination. And I argue, if we've talked about the cyber threat, this is that next level of it. If I can control the pipes where all your data comes through, and I get to reach in anytime I want and take anything I want, we better be darn sure and have the confidence that those people who are controlling those pipes can be trusted with every bit of data we have. And by the way, government information flows over those pipes as well. And what we found in these two companies was they are subsidized by the Chinese government. They have connections to both their military and intelligence capabilities, and they are provided opportunities, and unfortunately we found cases of bribery and corruption to get their networks in at a cost that is below the actual cost of the equipment, time, and labor to put in the gear to try to penetrate the market. And we came to a pretty serious conclusion that this is not in the best interest of the national security of the United States, and we better at least provide an opportunity for our information to be protected at the very basic level about having trust and confidence in the people who control the backbone, our infrastructure backbone here in the United States. So you can see how sophisticated this is, how complicated it's getting, even in a global market, and how absolutely critical it is for us to move pretty quickly to try to keep up with the paces and changes of nation-state capability, organized crime groups' capability, and lastly, I didn't talk about it, but we know that terrorist groups have been advertising through their networks to try to get cyber capability for their own interests and furthering their own political and philosophical interests. Pretty concerning stuff. So with that, if I haven't ruined your day already, I always find this speech is always better right around happy hour, right? Because you can at least go to the bar and get something to drink. I'm going to say thank you very much. Thanks for the summit for the invitation, and I'll be happy to take some questions here if we can do that.
Yes, hi, Congressman.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Hi. So America has some of the best universities in the world, and these days with the economy the way it is, it seems as though universities are being counted on to become economic stimulators and to provide innovation and technology transfer to help kickstart high tech here in the United States. Can you talk about, from your perspective, what you see in terms of threats to universities in general, and then maybe talk a little bit about how universities can be part of the solution as you see it?
Yeah, two things. One, I think we've got to shake ourselves out of this notion that folks who are not American citizens who come here in advanced degrees, and especially advanced technology to any degree, that we have this cold hard stop that you need to go back home when you're done getting all that great education and information. That's not the way we used to do it. I think we probably should get back to the way we used to do it and offer them some opportunity to stay here as a part of American companies and American innovation. I would do that very quickly because a lot of these, especially in the cyber programs, the minority of PhD and master's degree students are United States citizens, the minority. The vast minority. So we're training in the best technology at a place like University of Michigan, giving the best education in the world, and then we send them home to compete against our companies here. So I think we need to recalculate how we do that, number one. And number two, this is an interesting trend that's very concerning to me. So in 2010 and 2011, remember we always said, oh, we're going to out-innovate. We don't need to manufacture anything below this very high-end technological advanced manufacturing. We imported from China roughly $90 billion more in 2010 and 2011, advanced manufactured equipment of all degrees, than we exported. That is a dangerous trend for the United States. That means we're losing the manufacturing war and we're losing the advanced technological manufacturing war as well. That is really concerning to me, and it should be concerning to everybody in this room about how we move forward. So I think universities continue to do that. I think the federal government has an obligation to fund basic research, and we ought to continue to do that through our universities. University of Michigan has done a good job of commercialization of research and development. We can't just research it. We've got to turn it around into something that's commercially viable. University of Michigan has done that. We need to continue to encourage that. And you know what, a great bright light, by the way, in the state I know this is dangerous to say the day before the Michigan State game, but they, a very, very, very competitive grant, got the Rare Isotope Accelerator located at Michigan State University, which will hugely advance nuclear science as we know it, both for medicine and for other applications. This is huge. It'll be $1 billion investment over the next 10 years at that university. Those are the kinds of things I think that the federal government can do to further research and development, and then try to keep that, that extra learning, that new development here in the United States. Thanks.
Congressman, in addition to everything that you said, the Chinese are also currency manipulators, which have cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs. So what are we doing about this? I mean, they're completely dependent on our economy for growth. What disincentives do we have in place or are planned to be put in place?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have co-authored a bill on currency manipulation. For those of you who are wondering, what the Chinese have done is artificially lower the value of their currency, and there's lots of ways they can do that. So they don't let it flow with the market. And I think it's probably about 40% undervalued. So immediately when they go to compete against a US manufactured anything or a service anything, they are already 40% lower on the value of the currency alone in that competitive price, which is exactly why they do it. So they do that in order to artificially compete in the world marketplace. I think this is a serious and real problem. Part of the problem is we've got to get our spending under control. It's pretty hard to go to your banker and punch him in the nose and then say, oh, by the way, can I have more money? We got to stop that trend right now for the future of this country. And this bill, what this bill would do is give the criteria, because unfortunately, even currently, the Treasury Department says there is no currency manipulation, which is a laughable, laughable position to be in. We know it happens. Every economist says it happens. You can feel it in the economy. You can see their value of their currency undervalued. And I just assume that the Treasury Department understands that they got to go borrow money from them. That's the only conclusion I can come to. So here's what Congress did. Passed a bill that said, under these conditions, which if you do these conditions honestly and fairly, you will find currency manipulation, then we have the right for countervailing duties on products that we can show are unfairly, the cost basis is unfairly predicted by that currency. In other words, you could put a duty, let's say a car, for example, and is determined to be 40% under the cost, then you can apply a countervailing duty to make up that 40%. Does that make sense?
But are we in fact going to implement that?
Well, it did pass the House of Representatives. I heard in the debate that there's a candidate who said he would determine that it is currency manipulation right away. You know, I agree with that position. I think that the only way to deal with this is to deal with it for very certain, with a high degree of certainty, and I think we have to do it pretty soon. So it would take that or the passage of the bill. So it's a little slowed down in the Senate. I hope that we'll get some action on it soon, because in the state of Michigan, we think it may have cost as many as 750,000 jobs over the last decade, just currency manipulation. Huge problem. Thanks for bringing it up.
We have time for just one more question.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. The problem I have is with your comment about the foreign nationals who become educated over here, then offering them jobs. I just got my master's degree from University of Detroit Mercy in information assurance. Pretty much most of the people in my class were Americans, and we can't find jobs. After getting a master's degree, it's all, the government and everybody is saying, well, no, you also need to get the CISSP certification, which costs an additional $600. And also, we want you to have 5 to 10 years worth of experience. So if you've gone to all the trouble to get the education, what are you going to do when nobody wants to offer you a job because you don't have a certification and experience?
Yeah, well, two things. One is, it isn't a blatant thing. I come here and get the right education in the right sector and I get a job. That's not what we're talking about. But in certain cases, there is a high degree of technical capability, nuclear science, other things, where there is a gap. And our argument is, if there is a job for that particular person in a very niche field with their scientific capability, why would we send that person back to China or India if they could work for an American company and apply that very niche capability here? Now, in information insurance, it's a growing field, but here's part of the problem, is just the economy. And what you're running into is the fact that we had about 85% of American businesses say that because of the uncertainty in the economy today, they won't hire new people. And so what we're trying to do in Congress is try to eliminate as much of that uncertainty as we can. I'll give you a great example. According to the National Federation of Independent Business, there's 4,100 new regulations pending at the federal level that impact business, primarily small business. If we can remove that uncertainty, we think we can get the economy moving forward. And unfortunately, you're going to be at this mic for a long time if we don't remove that uncertainty in the economy. And so our argument is, let's try to remove that uncertainty. And here's the good news. We've never had businesses in America sitting on so much cash, almost $2 trillion in cash. And so part of that study was, why are you not investing? Why are you not investing in people? Why are you not investing in growth? And again, they keep saying, it's the uncertainty. I have no idea if I hire you today, what you will cost my company January 1st of next year. I have no idea what it will cost. So that's what we're trying to do. So again, it's not a blanket, you come get an information assurance degree, you can stay. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if you have this very specific technical degree that we need, and you are needed here at a company here, we will provide an opportunity for you to stay and work for that American company. Two different things, I think. But thank you for that, and good luck. I hope that works out well for you.
Thank you.
Yep. Oh, no more questions.
Thank you very much.
Joel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. No, thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.